For 19 years, Renee Caldwell wiped the same 11 stools at a diner on Bessemer Road that closed at 2 and opened again at 6. She made $7.85 an hour. On a cold Tuesday in March, a young woman came in at 11:40, soaked to the collar, and cried the way people cry when they have stopped expecting anyone to come. The diner was supposed to lock at 2. Renee did not put her out. She had no idea the cheap 9-year-old camera over the register was running, or that 11 days later a detective named Andre Whitaker would freeze it at 3:14 in the morning and lean in close. What she did in those 3 hours would reopen a grave a billion-dollar family had paid strangers to tend, and rewrite a will they had locked and tried to forget, starting with a name none of them had said out loud in 6 years. Renee Caldwell was 47 years old, and she had worked nights for most of her adult life, because nights paid a little more, and because the dark suited a person who had learned not to want to be seen. Her morning started at 4:40 in the afternoon, which was a joke she used to tell and had stopped telling. She woke in the small house on 12th Street in Pratt City that had belonged to her mother and now belonged to the bank for another 11 years, and she put on the percolator that took 6 minutes, and she ate 2 pieces of toast standing at the counter because sitting down made it harder to stand back up. She wore the same shoes she had worn for 2 winters. The left sole had separated at the toe, and she had glued it twice, and now she just curled her foot a certain way so it would not flap when she walked. The bus was $2.25 each way, and $4.50 a day was $31.50 a week, and at $7.85 an hour that was 4 hours of work a week. She handed straight back to the city of Birmingham just to get to the job and home from it. So 3 nights out of 5 she walked. It was 28 minutes from 12th Street to Bessemer Road if she walked it hard, 34 if her hip was bad. She had memorized the broken places in the sidewalk on Avenue F the way some people memorize psalms, the lifted slab outside the shuttered laundromat, the missing grate by the corner store where Mr. Pruitt sold single cigarettes for a quarter and let the church ladies run a tab. On the cold nights she pulled her mother's old wool coat tight and walked with her chin down and counted the blocks, and the counting was a kind of prayer, and the walking was a kind of tithe, and she did not complain about either, not out loud, not to anyone, because complaining was a thing her mother had never once done in 31 years of cleaning houses. She would never be invited to sit down in. Her shift at Earl's ran from 6 in the evening to 2 in the morning, 8 hours, and on a good night the tips ran $45, and on a bad night they ran 11. People who eat in a diner at 1 in the morning are not, as a rule, people having their best week, and Renee had learned a long time ago that the ones who tipped the least were usually the ones who needed the seat the most, and she had decided that was all right with her. Earl's was a long room with a counter down one side and 6 booths down the other, and a grill in the back that Big Earl himself still worked 4 nights a week even though he was 71 and had a heart they had already opened once. The booths were red vinyl, patched with red tape that did not match. The coffee was 80 cents and free after the first cup if Renee was the one pouring, which Earl pretended not to know. The sign out front had a letter burned out, so for 9 years it had read "ERS," and the regulars called it that, the ears, like the diner was listening. She knew the night people the way a nurse knows a ward. There was the man she called Mr. Tuesday because he only ever came on Tuesdays, who took his eggs broken dry and his coffee black, and who had not said more than 9 words to her in 3 years and tipped exactly $1, and folded it into a tent under the rim of the cup every single time, and she had decided that the dollar tent was his way of saying something he did not have other words for. There was the woman from the overnight shift at the nursing home on 10th, who came in at 5:45 smelling of the work and ate in silence with her shoes loosened under the table, and Renee always cut her pie a little wide. There was the boy. The boy came in some nights, not every night, 15 or 16 years old with a backpack he never took off, and he would sit at the far end of the counter and order nothing, and Renee had learned not to ask. The first time she had set a glass of water in front of him without a word, and he had looked at it like it might be a trick, and then he had drunk it. After that she had a system. She would say, loud enough for the room and quiet enough for him, "I made too many of these, you'd be doing me a favor," and slide a plate of whatever was about to be thrown out across the counter, biscuits going hard, a grilled cheese cut on the angle, and he would eat it fast with his head down and leave before she could see which way he went. She did not know his name. She did not ask his name. A name is a thing you can be made to give an account of, and she had decided the boy already gave too many accounts of himself to too many people, and that the diner would be the one place that asked him for nothing. She did not tell anyone about the boy. She did not tell anyone about a lot of it. There was a tin she kept under the register, an old peppermint tin gone soft at the corners, and on the nights the tips ran past 40 she put $1 or $2 in it, and when somebody came in with their head down and their pockets turned out, she would ring up their plate and pay the difference out of the tin and tell them it was on the house tonight, the house being her. She had done it the week before for a young father with a toddler asleep on his shoulder at 1 in the morning, the man counting change onto the counter in a way Renee knew in her body, the dime, the nickel, the long pause. She had waved it off. How special, she'd said. The man had looked at her, and his eyes had filled, and she had turned quickly to the coffee so he would not have to be seen doing it. Earl knew. Earl had known for 19 years. He let the lie stand because he understood that a man who is given something for free will sometimes feel small. But a man who is told the diner has a policy will sometimes feel lucky. And there is a difference. And the difference is dignity. And Renee had learned that difference from her mother in a kitchen on 12th Street a long time ago. Her mother, Renee Caldwell, had cleaned other people's houses in Mountain Brook for 31 years and had come up, as she put it, from the South, from a town outside Selma where her own mother had picked somebody else's cotton. And Lavada had a way of saying things once and only once at the kitchen table, with her bare feet up on the second chair. You don't leave nobody sitting in the dark, she used to say, just because the clock says you can go home. She said other things too. She said, when Renee was 16 and crying over something a teacher had said, you don't owe a single living soul an explanation for surviving. She said grace over cornbread and collard greens and a skillet of fried okra on Sunday, like the food was a guest she was glad to see, and she made the family hold hands around the table even the years it was just the two of them because, she said, a table where nobody holds hands is just furniture. She kept a cast-iron skillet that her own mother had carried up from Alabama in a flour sack, black as a church shoe, and she would not let it touch soap, and she would say, scraping it with salt and a rag, that some things you don't wash, you season, and that people were the same way, that you didn't scrub a person down to nothing for their mistakes, you fed them till the bad cooked out. When she died, she left Renee the house and the skillet and $1,100 in a Christmas Club account and a Bible with the spine taped, and Renee used all of it except the skillet, which she had never once let touch soap either, and which sat on her stove now like a black moon. Renee had a daughter once. She did not talk about this. The regulars at Earl's did not know it, and the new girls did not know it, and even Big Earl only knew the shape of it and never the middle. Her daughter's name was Tia, and she had been born on a Sunday in the spring, with a heart that the doctor said had a hole in it that they would fix when she was bigger, and they fixed it twice, and the second time it held, and for 16 years Renee believed the worst was behind them. Tia grew up tall and quick and impatient and beautiful, with her grandmother's hands, and she sang in the youth choir at Greater Vision Baptist over on Avenue C, second row from the left, and she could not sit still through a sermon to save her life, and she could sing the back wall down once she stood up. She wanted to be a nurse, of all the things, a nurse, because she said somebody fixed her once when she was small, and she figured she owed it forward, and she used to practice taking Renee's blood pressure at the kitchen table, with a cuff she'd bought at the drugstore for $9, narrating it in a serious voice like she was on the television. Tia was 19 and 4 months when her heart stopped. It was not the old hole. It was something new and fast that nobody had been watching for. She had gone to the emergency room at university on a night Renee was working a double at a diner 2 towns over, a Friday, because the diner was short, and the tips on Friday ran 60 and they needed the 60 for the light bill that was 12 days past, and by the time Renee got the call and got across the city, on the bus, in the rain, transferring twice at 5 points, with the second bus running 9 minutes late, Tia had already been gone for 40 minutes. Renee had not been in the room. That was the thing. That was the whole thing, the thing under the thing she carried the way you carry a stone you cannot put down, because putting it down would mean admitting your hands are free. Her daughter had been frightened, and then she had been alone, and then she had been gone. And the one place in the world Renee Caldwell was supposed to be, the only place, she had not been, because she was wiping a counter for $60 she could not now remember spending. She had not even gotten to hold her hand. The nurse, a kind young woman who had stayed past her own shift, had held it instead, had told Renee afterward in the hallway that Tia had not been alone, that someone had been with her, and Renee had thanked her and had gone home, and had understood for the first time what her own mother had meant about the dark and the clock, and had understood it 11 years too late, in the one way you are never able to use. She had been to the grave at Shadow Lawn maybe 4 times in 11 years. She could not make herself go more. She told herself it was the bus fare, an hour and 10 minutes each way out to the county line. It was not the bus fare. So when Renee worked nights now, when she stayed past her shift, when she set down a glass of water in front of a boy who could not pay, what looked from the outside like kindness was, from the inside, something closer to a debt she was paying to a person who could no longer collect it. She had not been in the room once. She had decided, without ever saying the words even to herself, that she would never let it be said again that Renee Caldwell left somebody alone in the dark just because the clock said she could go home. She just never expected the somebody to be who it turned out to be. 310 miles is nothing to a man with a plane, and Damon Whitfield had a plane. But he had not used it to go to his daughter, and that was a fact he had not yet learned how to live with on the night this story turns. Damon Whitfield was 58 years old, and he was worth, by the most recent accounting his people had put in front of him, $1.4 billion, give or take the swing of 2 shopping centers in Atlanta, and a stake in a Houston tower he was thinking of selling. He owned Whitfield Reed, a real estate firm that had started as one shotgun house he bought for $4,100 in Ensley in 1986, fixed with his own hands over 11 weekends, and rented to a family who paid on time for 9 years, and was now 41 buildings across 4 states. People who met him for the first time always said the same thing afterward, which was that he was smaller than they expected and quieter than they expected, and that his eyes did not leave you, and that the meeting was over before they understood it had been a negotiation. He had come up from nothing, and he said so, often in the clipped way of a man who has decided his biography as a credential. His father, Otis Whitfield, had worked the coke ovens at the steel mill in Fairfield for 26 years and had died with black under his nails and $300 in the bank and a back so bent he could not lie flat to be buried. Otis had not been a soft man. He had not had the room to be. Otis had said more than once, with his hand flat on the kitchen table the way men of that time and place set down a law, "A man takes care of his own and asks nobody." He said it the day the company store turned them away with the baby sick. He said it the day young Damon got into trouble he could not get out of and went looking for help up and down the street he had grown up on and found none, found doors that did not open and faces that turned, and Otis had stood him in the kitchen afterward and said the thing that built the man and broke him in the same breath. "Nobody is coming," Otis told him. "You hear me, boy? Nobody is coming, so you better be enough." Damon had built an empire on that sentence. He had also, though he would not have said it this way, built a wall, brick by brick, year by year, and called it strength because his father had called it strength, and never once asked what it was costing him because the asking itself would have been a kind of weakness Otis had taught him to despise. He had married a woman named Carol Jean, a schoolteacher from Tuscaloosa, who laughed with her whole face and called him on every gold thing he ever said, and for 30 years she was the door in the wall, the one person who could walk through it without knocking. She made him hold the hands of strangers at church. She made him learn the names of the men who parked the cars. They had one child late, a daughter, Nia, born Carol Jean was 39 and Damon was 41, and Carol Jean raised that girl to be soft in all the places Damon had taught himself to be hard, on purpose as a kind of correction, as if she could see the wall going up around the father and was determined the daughter would be built a different way. Carol Jean died 6 years ago. It was cancer and it was fast, 11 weeks from the word to the funeral. And Damon spent $400,000 in those 11 weeks on doctors in Houston and Boston and one in Switzerland on the phone at 3 in the morning. And not one of them could do the thing he had spent his whole life believing money could finally do, which was fix it. He sat by her bed at the end in the house with the circular drive, and he held her hand and she told him, near the last with what breath she had left, "Don't you close up on her, Damon. Don't you dare. She is not strong like you. She is better than strong. She is open. Don't you teach her to shut." And he had said he wouldn't. And then she was gone, and the grief came at him like the wall coming down all at once. And he did the only thing he knew to do with a wall that was down, which was build it back, higher, faster. And the girl was on the outside of it before he understood he was the one who had put her there. Nia was 18 when her mother died. She fell apart the way the open ones do, and Damon did not know how to sit with a person falling apart because the only thing his father had ever taught him to do with pain was outwork it. He bought her the best help, he paid for the best school. He stood in doorways with his arms crossed at the elbow and said the things Otis had said, "Nobody is coming, so you better be enough." And he meant it as love. He genuinely meant it as the truest love he had. The only inheritance he trusted. The only thing his own father had ever handed him that had not rusted. And Nia heard it as exactly what it sounded like, which was a door closing in a house that had just lost the one person who knew how to open it. There was a piano in that house. Carol Jean had played it on Sunday evenings and Nia had learned at her elbow. And after the funeral nobody played it, and it sat in the front room getting dusted by a service twice a week, in tune and silent, 4 feet of polished walnut that nobody touched, and Damon walked past it every morning on his way to the car and had trained himself not to see it the way he had trained himself not to see a great many things. They had a fight 3 years ago. Nobody else was there for it. So the only two accounts of it are his and hers, and they do not match, the way these things never do. What is known is that she wanted to leave the business program he had chosen for her and do something with music, and he told her he would not fund a daydream, that she could come back to the firm and earn her place and learn what it cost to stand on her own 2 feet, and she told him he had never once in her whole life stood beside her, only above her, looking down, the way he was looking down at her right then, and she walked out. She left the city. She changed her number. For a while there were sightings, a friend who'd seen her in Atlanta, a charge on a card he still quietly paid that pinged in Nashville, then somewhere in Tennessee, then nothing for 14 months. Damon told his people she was finding herself. He told the board she was traveling abroad. He told no one the truth, which was that he did not know where his daughter Assis was sleeping at night, and that some evenings he stood in the kitchen of a house worth $4 million with all its lights on and could not, when he reached for it, remember the sound of her laugh, and that he had begun, against everything Otis Whitfield had ever beaten into him, to be afraid. The fear did not feel like fear. It felt like a draft in a house he had built to be airtight. So he did the thing rich men do with fear. He hired it out. He brought in a private firm at $60,000, and when the private firm came up empty, he made a call to a man he trusted more than the firm, a detective in the Birmingham police he had met 4 years before, through his late wife's foundation, a steady, slow-talking man named Andre Whitaker, and he asked him, off the books, as a favor man to man, to find his daughter before something worse found her first. He told Whitaker everything, the schools, the friends, the cards, the cities. He told him everything except the part that mattered, the part he had not said out loud to a single living person, which was that the last words his only child had heard from him were that nobody was coming, and that she had better be enough. He did not yet know that someone already had come. It had been raining in Birmingham for 2 days, a cold March rain that came sideways off the ridge and stood in the low places on Bessemer Road, and the night it happened. The temperature was 38 degrees and falling, and the diner was empty by 11:30, except for a trucker in the second booth nursing a decaf and the radio low in the back where Big Earl was scraping the grill before he left. The young woman came in at 11:40. Renee saw her before the door finished closing, the way she saw all of them now, the whole story in the first 3 seconds. The woman was maybe 24. She had on a man's canvas work jacket too big for her and soaked through at the shoulders, and her braids were coming loose at the front where the rain had gotten them, and she had the specific stillness of a person who has been walking a long time toward nothing in particular. She did not look at the menu in the chrome holder. She slid into the last booth, booth 6, the one against the wall by the pie case, and she put her hands flat on the table and she looked at them, and then her shoulders started to go, small at first, the way it does when somebody is trying with everything they have left not to do it in public. Earlier that night the woman had been turned away twice. Renee did not know this then and would learn it later in pieces. A gas station on 3rd Avenue had asked her to move along when she stood too long under the awning out of the rain, the clerk not cruel, only following a sign on the wall. A shelter on 10th had been full since 841 beds and 41 bodies, and the man at the desk had not been unkind, only tired, and tired reads the same as unkind when you are at the end of yourself. By the time she reached the ears she had nothing left to be turned away from, so she just sat down where the lights were on, in the last booth in the last open room on the street, because the lights were on. Renee did not go over right away. That was a thing she knew in her hands. You do not crowd a person who is barely holding the lid on. She let 2 minutes pass. She topped off the trucker's decaf he had not asked for. Then she filled a heavy white mug with coffee, and she carried it to booth 6 and set it down without a sound, the way her mother set things down, and she said, "Not loud, it's hot, you don't have to drink it, it's just there if you want it." The woman did not look up, but her hands moved after a moment and they wrapped around the mug, both of them, the way you hold something you are afraid will be taken from you, and she breathed out a long shaking breath that had been waiting all night to be let go, and she said, in a voice scraped down to almost nothing, "I can't pay for it." "I didn't ask you to," Renee said, and she went back behind the counter, because the second thing she knew in her hands was that you give a person room to decide whether you are safe. Big Earl came out from the back with his coat already on at 10:02. He looked at the woman in booth 6 and he looked at Renee, and a whole conversation happened in that look that had been happening between the two of them for 19 years without many words in it. Earl had a heart they had opened once and a wife at home who worried and a 30-minute drive in the rain, and he was 71 and he set his keys down on the counter anyway and said, low, under the radio, "You want me to stay on?" "Go home, Earl," Renee said, "I got her." "Lock the grill if you cut it back on," he said, which was Earl's way of saying he trusted her with the whole of his place and his livelihood and the girl in the booth. And he went, slow, favoring his left knee, and the bell over the door rang once, and a few minutes later the trucker left 2 singles under his cup and went too, and the bell rang again, and then it was just Renee and the woman and the rain on the glass, and the clock on the wall behind the register that clicked over to 2, which was the time the diner closed, and the time, by every rule Renee had ever been given by anybody, that she was free to lock up and walk home and not think one more thought about a stranger in a booth. She walked to the door. She turned the lock. She did not turn off the sign. Then she did the thing the camera over the register recorded, the thing a detective would freeze and stare at 11 days later, the thing that has no name in the rules of the diner or the rules of the world, but that her mother had a name for once at a kitchen table on 12th Street. She made the girl a plate. She cut the grill back on, and she made 2 eggs broken dry, and she warmed the last of the cornbread in the oven, and she took the very last piece of sweet potato pie out of the case, the one she had set aside to carry home, and she put it all on a plate and carried it to booth 6 and set it down. And then she did the part the new girls never understood, the part that took 19 years and 1 buried daughter to learn. She did not stand over the table with a coffee pot and a bright voice. She slid into the other side of the booth, off the clock in the locked and empty diner, like the girl was company come to Sunday dinner, and she folded her hands on the table and she said, "Eat what you can. You don't have to say a word to me. I'm just going to sit here a minute. My feet are killing me anyhow." And for a long time the girl didn't say anything. She ate a little, slow, then less slow. She cried some more, quieter now, the way it goes once somebody is actually sweet with you, less like drowning, and more like the rain outside, steady and survivable. Renee did not interrupt it. She had learned that you do not fix a person who is crying. You do not advise them. You do not tell them it will be all right, because you do not know that, and they can hear the lie. You just hold the room. So she held the room. She sat there in the empty diner at 2:30 in the morning with her bad hip and her glued shoe, and her 4 hours of bus fare she'd saved by walking, and she did not check the clock, and she did not call the police, and she did not call a shelter, and she did not call anyone at all. She just stayed the way somebody had once stayed with her own girl in a room she herself had not been able to reach. At 3:14 in the morning, the timestamp white in the corner of the frame, the girl finally lifted her head and said something, and Renee leaned across the table to hear it. And that was the moment, that exact frozen moment, that a man would later sit in a county office and play over and over and over, with his coffee going cold beside him, trying to understand what on earth he was looking at. What the man would be looking at, and what he would not for some time understand, was his employer's daughter being fed by a stranger. The girl in booth 6 was Nia Whitfield. She did not say so. She said her name was Nia, and nothing after it, and Renee did not push, because Renee of all people understood that a person gets to choose which parts of their name they carry into a room and which parts they leave at the door. So Renee did not know that night that the soaked and shaking young woman across the booth was the only child of Damon Whitfield of Whitfield Reed, that she had grown up in a house with a circular drive and a walnut piano that nobody played anymore, that there was a man 310 miles away who would have signed over a shopping center in Atlanta that very hour to know which booth, in which diner on which street his daughter was sitting in, alive, eating cornbread, breathing. And Nia did not know that the woman who had slid into the booth across from her had buried a daughter near her own age, had not been able to get to the room in time, had spent 11 years paying down a debt to a girl who could no longer take the payment. 2 women 3 feet apart across a red vinyl booth patched with tape that did not match, each one holding the exact shape of what the other had lost, and neither one knowing it, and the only witness a 9-year-old camera with a white clock ticking in the corner of the frame. Damon Whitfield had walked past 1,000 Renees in his life. He had ridden up 40 floors past the women who cleaned the lobbies of his own buildings, had nodded at them without seeing them, had once years ago signed a memo cutting the overnight cleaning contract by 9%, and never thought about whose $7 hour the 9% came out of. He had a foundation with his late wife's name on it that gave grants to programs that served, on its glossy annual report, the underserved community, and he had stood at the gala in a tailored suit and given away $1.1 million in a single evening to applause, and he had never once in 6 years sat down in a booth across from a single one of those underserved people at 3 in the morning and asked them nothing and offered them everything. He had given millions and been present for none of it. That was the wall. The wall let money out and never once let a person in. And now, in the same city in the same cold week, his money was out looking for his daughter through a private firm and a police detective and a quiet network of card alerts, an enormous machinery of wealth trying to do at a distance the one thing wealth has never once been able to do, which is sit down beside a frightened person in the dark and stay past closing. while 4 miles south of where the machinery was grinding, for free, off the clock with the last piece of pie she had meant to carry home to an empty house, a woman who made $7.85 an hour was already doing it, and had been doing it for an hour, and would do it for 2 more. The detective, Andre Whitaker, had been working the case for 9 days when the diner footage came up. He was a careful man, 51 years old, a deacon at his own church over in Titusville, and the kind of investigator who read a room the way Renee read the first 3 seconds of a customer. Damon's people had given him Naya's old card numbers, and one of them, a card Damon still quietly paid the balance on every month, had pinged exactly once in Birmingham 11 days back, a $4.20 charge at a gas station on 3rd Avenue at 10:50 at night. Whitaker had pulled the gas station's tape and watched a young woman in a too-big jacket get asked to move along from under the awning, and had watched her square her shoulders and walk south into the rain, off-camera, toward Bessemer Road. So he had started pulling every camera south of 3rd, the patient unglamorous work the television never shows. A pharmacy, a closed tire shop, a church with a camera on its parking lot, and a diner with a burned-out letter in its sign that the city's business permit file still listed under its full legal name. A diner that turned out to have a cheap 9-year-old unit mounted over the register that happened to cover the entire front room, and a cook and manager named Earl who handed over the footage without a warrant because a soft-spoken detective asked him nicely, and because Earl had nothing in that diner to hide except a waitress who gave away more pie than she ever rang up. And that was not the kind of thing a man hides from a deacon. Whitaker took the tape back to the county office and got a cup of the bad coffee and scrubbed forward to 11:40. He watched the young woman come in and sit in the last booth. He watched the place empty out. He watched the cook leave and the trucker leave. He watched the waitress walk to the front and turn the lock on the door, and he sat up straighter in his chair. Because in 26 years of doing this work, a locked door at 2 in the morning with one customer still inside was almost always the opening frame of a very different kind of report, the kind he had written too many of. Then he watched the waitress come back around the counter with a plate and slide into the booth and sit down across from the girl. He frowned. He scrubbed forward. 2:30. They were still sitting there. 3, still sitting. 3:14, and the young woman lifted her head and said something, and the waitress leaned in to hear it, and Andre Whitaker, who had been doing this for 26 years, and had stopped being surprised by people somewhere back around year 9, found that he had stopped scrubbing the footage forward and was just letting it run in real time. 3 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, 11 days gone, 2 strangers in a closed diner, and he did not yet know whose daughter he was looking at, and he did not yet know what the waitress had written on the paper napkin she folded once and slid across the table, and he reached over without taking his off the screen and picked up the phone to call the man who was paying him. He thought he had found a missing girl. He had found something his client did not have a word for yet, and would have to learn the way you learn a foreign language late in life, slowly, and with shame, and starting from a single sentence written in ballpoint pen on the back of a diner napkin. Working title: Waitress stayed 3 hours past closing to help a crying stranger. A detective saw the footage. Part 2 payoff section. Internal beats T6 T11 plain. Narration. Do not read beat labels on screen. Continues directly from Part 1, the 3:14 a.m. booth. What the girl said at 3:14 was this: "I didn't come in here to eat." Renee did not move. She did not reach across the table. She kept her hands folded where they were, and she said, "All right. I came in because the light was on." Naya turned the white mug a quarter turn on the table, watching it like it was the only steady thing in the room. "I've been walking since 10. The shelter was full. The gas station told me to move. And I just kept thinking, if I could get to a place where the light was on, I wouldn't have to do the rest of tonight by myself." She stopped. Her jaw worked. "I hadn't planned past tonight. That's the thing nobody tells you. You can run all the way out of plan." Renee had heard a lot of confessions across a lot of counters at a lot of hours that decent people are asleep. She had learned the only true thing she knew about them, which was that the worst thing you can do to a person who has finally said the unsayable is rush to fix it, because rushing to fix it tells them the thing was too big to just be heard. So she did not say it will be all right. She did not say you have so much to live for. She did not say anything for a moment at all. She let the sentence sit in the booth between them like a third person who had finally been let in out of the rain. Then she said quiet, "What's your daddy's voice say to you when it's late?" Nia looked up, startled, because it was exactly the right question and exactly the wrong one, and she did not know how Renee had known there was a father in it at all. "He says nobody's coming," Nia said, her eyes filled. "He says nobody's coming, so I'd better be enough, and I tried. For a whole year I tried to be enough by myself, and I just got smaller and smaller, and tonight I ran out of." She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. I ran out. Renee nodded, slow, like a woman taking in the weather. She did not tell Naya that she was wrong about her father. She did not know yet that there even was a father worth $1 billion. She only knew that a young woman was sitting in front of her believing nobody was coming, on the very night somebody had, and that the somebody was a tired 47-year-old waitress with a glued shoe, and that this was, when you got right down to the floor of it, the whole argument of Renee's life. She reached over and pulled a paper napkin out of the chrome dispenser. She took the ballpoint pen out of her apron, the one chained to the order pad, and she unclipped it, and she wrote something on the napkin, 4 lines, taking her time, the way her mother used to write a recipe out by hand for somebody who'd asked. She folded it once. She slid it across the table. Don't read it now, she said. Read it on a day you've run out. Put it somewhere you'll find it by accident. Nia took the napkin in 2 fingers and tucked it into the breast pocket of the too big canvas jacket, over her heart without looking at it, because something in the woman's voice told her it was the kind of thing you only get to read for the first time once. They sat a while longer. Renee warmed the pie. Around 4:40, the sky going from black to the color of dishwater, Naya said she had a place she could go now, a friend's couch she'd been too proud to call from, and she could see now that pride was a thing she could not afford this week. Renee wrapped the rest of the sweet potato pie in foil and folded the top down tight the way you cover something you want to keep warm a little longer than it has any right to stay warm, and she put it in Naya's hands, and she walked her to the door and turned the lock and let her out into the gray, and she stood in the doorway in her apron and watched the girl go up Bessemer Road until she was just a shape, and then not even that. She did not know the girl's last name. She did not get a phone number. She figured she would never see her again, and she was at peace with that, because her mother had taught her that you do not give a person a plate so they will come back. You give them a plate so they can get up. Then she went home, on foot in the cold 28 minutes, and she did not tell a single soul what had happened, because she never did. 11 days later, Andre Whitaker made his phone call, and Damon Whitfield flew to Birmingham the same night. Whitaker had done the work the way he always did it, all the way to the floor. He had traced Naya to the friend's couch in Woodlawn, confirmed she was alive and safe, and 4 days into a women's recovery program on 11th Court that she had walked into on her own, and that alone was the report Damon had hired him to deliver. But Whitaker was a deacon and a careful man, and he had watched the diner footage end to end, 3 full hours of it, and he had felt something turn over in him that he had not felt over a case in a long time. And so he had done one more thing that nobody had asked him to do. He had run the Waitress. Her name was Renee Caldwell, 47, of 12th Street, Pratt City. No record, 1 marriage, widowed at 31, and 1 dependent listed on an old tax filing, and then never again. A daughter, Taya Caldwell, deceased, age 19, 11 years gone this spring. When Damon arrived at the county office at 11 that night, in a coat that cost more than Renee made in a month, Whitaker sat him down, and he did not soften it, because some things you do not season, you serve plain. He played him the footage. He let it run. He did not narrate it. He let Damon watch a stranger turn the lock, and make a plate, and slide into the booth, and sit with his daughter for 3 hours in the dark while the whole expensive machinery of Damon's fear was 4 miles away pulling tapes. Then he told him who the waitress was. The woman who stayed with your daughter, Mr. Whitfield. Whitaker turned the folder around on the desk so Damon could see the single page. Her own girl died 11 years ago, 19 years old. Mama was working a double across town and couldn't get there in time. He let that land. She couldn't sit with her own, so I expect she's made it her business not to let it happen to anybody she can reach. Damon Whitfield looked at the page for a long time. Then he asked, in a voice that did not sound like the voice that closed deals, if anyone had recovered the napkin. They had not, but Nia had it. Nia had kept it folded in her breast pocket for 11 days and had not read it, because the woman had told her to save it for a day she'd run out, and Nia, 4 days clean and terrified and trying, had decided every day was still that day and she was saving it for a worse one. Damon went to the program on 11th Court the next morning. He had not seen his daughter in 3 years. He did not bring a check. He did not bring a speech. He stood in a linoleum hallway that smelled like coffee and bleach, and his daughter came around the corner and stopped, and they looked at each other across 14 feet of cheap floor, and neither of them said the thing they had each rehearsed for 1,000 nights. What Nia did was reach into the breast pocket of the canvas jacket, which she was still wearing because it was the only coat she had, and she took out the folded napkin, soft now from 11 days against her heart, and she held it out to him, and she said, "A woman gave me this. I think you're supposed to read it." Damon Whitfield unfolded the napkin in a hallway on 11th Court and read 4 lines written in ballpoint pen by a waitress who had never heard his name. It said, "Baby, somebody is always coming. Sometimes she's just late and tired and on the second bus. You don't have to be enough. You just have to still be here when she gets there. Miss Renee, the ears on Bessemer. He read it once. He read it again. He understood on the second reading that the woman who wrote it had been describing herself. The late one, the tired one, the one on the second bus. The one who got there too late once and had spent 11 years making sure she would never be the reason a person gave up waiting. He understood that she had answered, without knowing it, the exact sentence his father had handed him in a kitchen in Fairfield. The sentence he had handed his daughter like an heirloom. Nobody is coming, so you better be enough. He understood that it was a lie. That it had always been a lie. That his father had been a frightened man passing down the only armor he had. And that armor was not the same thing as love. And that Damon had spent 58 years confusing the two and had nearly buried his own child under the difference. He put his face in his hands, there in the hallway, in front of his daughter and a recovery counselor and a poster about one day at a time. And for the first time in 6 years, Damon Whitfield cried. Not the hell-jaw, single-tear way grief comes in the movies, the other way. The way it sounds in kitchens, at midnight, when a strong man finally sets down a thing he has been carrying so long he forgot it was not part of his own body. Naya crossed the 14 feet of floor and she did not say it's okay, because the woman on the napkin had taught her, in 3 hours, that you do not rush to fix a person who has finally said the unsayable. She just put her hand on her father's back and she stayed. They stayed in that hallway a long time. Nobody was counting. It took Damon Whitfield 2 weeks to find the courage to walk into the diner on Bessemer Road, which was, he would say later, harder than any boardroom he had ever walked into. And he had walked into rooms that decided the fate of 41 buildings. He came at 1 in the morning, because that was when she worked, and he sat at the counter, and Renee poured him coffee before he asked. 80 cents free after the first cup, and she did not recognize him, because to Renee he was just a tired man in a good coat at a bad hour, which is to say he was exactly the kind of person she had spent her life being kind to. He told her who he was. He told her about the footage and the detective and the napkin. He watched her face change as she understood that the soaked girl in booth 6 had a father, and that the father was sitting at her counter, and that the whole quiet thing she had done in the dark to keep her debt to a dead daughter had been seen, all of it, by exactly the people she would have most wanted not to see it. Then Damon Whitfield did the only thing he had ever known how to do for another person. He took out a checkbook. He said he wanted to pay off her house. He said he wanted to give her $200,000, that it was nothing to him, that she had no idea what was nothing to him, and that he would consider it the cheapest thing he had ever bought. Renee looked at the checkbook the way you look at a snake that has come up onto the porch, not afraid of it exactly, just clear about what it is. I don't take what I haven't earned, she said. And I didn't earn nothing. I sat down. Anybody could have sat down. The terrible part, mister, the part you ought to be writing your checks about, is that out of everybody who walked past that gas station and that shelter, the only person who sat down was the one making $7 an hour. You want to fix something, don't fix me. I'm not broke. Damon put the checkbook away. He sat with that for a while, the coffee going cold the way his coffee always went cold, and then he asked her the only honest question he had. He asked her what she would do if she had his money, what she would actually do. And Renee, who had thought about this exact thing on 28-minute walks home for 19 years, told him. She told him about the second bus. She told him there ought to be a thing, she didn't know what you'd call it, where there were people whose whole job, whose paid job, with dignity, with a wage a person could live on, was just to be the one who shows up. To sit in the ER waiting room with the ones who came in alone, to stay past closing, to be there at 3 in the morning so that no child of anybody's, rich or poor, ever again had to run all the way out of plan in a city full of locked doors believing nobody was coming. Presents, she said. You can't mail it, you got to send a person, and the people who'd be good at it are the ones already doing it for free and going broke doing it. She nodded at the peppermint tin under the register. Pay them, that's all. Pay the ones who already show up. Damon Whitfield, who had given away $1.1 million in a single evening to applause and felt nothing, sat in a diner at 1:30 in the morning and felt the floor of his life shift under him, because a waitress had just described in plain words over 80-cent coffee, the thing his wife had been trying to teach him for 30 years and the thing his money had never once been able to do. He did not write her a check. He offered her a job, salaried, to build the thing she had just described and to run it, and to train the people, and to never apologize for paying them a living wage, and he told her that this was not charity, because she would work harder than she had ever worked. And she told him she did not know the first thing about running anything, and he told her she had just run it in 3 hours in booth 6, better than his entire foundation had run in 6 years, and that he would handle the spreadsheets. which were the only thing he was actually good at, and that she would handle the part that mattered, which was the part he had never learned. She said she would think about it. She thought about it for 1 week. Then she said yes on one condition, which was that they not name it after her. They named it the Renee Caldwell Fund. Renee had not agreed to that easily. But Damon had said, with the particular stubbornness of a man who has only recently learned the word for what he is doing, that you do not build a thing about somebody not having to wait alone and then leave out the name of the girl who waited alone. And Renee had gone out to Shadowlawn for the first time in 2 years to ask her daughter about it, on the bus, 1 hour and 10 minutes each way, except this time she was not alone on the bus, because Nia rode with her, and they sat at the grave a while, and Renee told her daughter the whole thing, out loud, the booth and the rain and the napkin and the man at the counter. And somewhere in the telling she stopped apologizing to the stone for being late, because the work she was about to do was the apology, and it was a better one than words. In its first year, the Renee Caldwell Fund put 41 trained, salaried companions into the overnight hours of 7 hospitals and 4 shelters across Birmingham, and paid every one of them $19 an hour, which Renee had picked on purpose and would not explain to the board, and which Damon, who had read the file, did not make her explain. In that first year, those 41 people sat with 312 human beings who would otherwise have been alone at the worst hour of the worst night of their lives. Not one of them was asked their last name unless they wanted to give it. There was always a plate. The program could not save all of them. Presence is not a cure. But not one of them ran all the way out of plan in a room with the lights off and nobody in the chair. And Renee had decided a long time ago, at a kitchen table on 12th Street, that this was not nothing. This was, in fact, the whole thing. Big Earl let them hang a framed napkin on the wall of the diner by the pie case over booth 6. It was a copy. Nia kept the original, soft against her heart in a coat she had finally been able to retire. Under the frame Earl had screwed a little brass plate, and on the plate it said only the ears on Bessemer, and the regulars who asked were told the story, and the regulars who didn't ask just ate their pie under it, which was, Renee thought, exactly right. The boy with the backpack came in one night that winter, and there was a woman at the counter he didn't know, with a name tag from the fund, and she said, loud enough for the room and quiet enough for him, that she'd made too many of these and he'd be doing her a favor, and slid a plate across the counter. He ate it fast with his head down. He did not know it was Renee's recipe. He did not know anything had changed in the world at all. That was the point. The dark had simply gotten a little more crowded with people who would not leave just because the clock said they could. Nia went back to her music. She also, on Thursday nights, sat in the ER at University on the same hard chairs where a stranger had once held her father's wife's. No, where a nurse had once held a stranger's daughter's hand, the lines crossing now in ways nobody could fully draw, and she was good at it, the staying, because she had been on the other side of the booth and she knew the only thing you really had to do was not get up. And Damon Whitfield learned, late at 58, with a great deal of shame and a great deal of money, he finally knew what to do with, how to be the one who stays. He was not good at it at first. He brought spreadsheets to hospital rooms. But he came, he sat. He stopped saying nobody is coming. He started, instead, saying the other thing, the true thing, the thing a waitress had written on a napkin he now kept folded in his own breast pocket, in a suit that cost more than she used to make in a month, over a heart that had taken 6 years and 1 piece of sweet potato pie to crack open. Somebody is always coming. You just have to still be here when she gets there. If this story made you think of someone who once stayed when they could have gone home, send it to them tonight and tell them you remember. They probably think nobody noticed. Somebody did. And here is the question I want you to sit with, the one that splits the room every time. Damon Whitfield gave away more than $1 million a year for 6 years, and it changed nothing. Not one life, not even his own. A tired waitress gave away 3 hours, piece of pie in the case, and it changed everything. So which one of them was really generous? The one who had everything to give and gave money, or the one who had nothing to spare and gave herself? And if you are honest, all the way to the floor, the way Renee would want you to be honest, which one of them are you? On the nights the clock says you can go home? Tell me below. I read them. There's a line in tonight's story I keep coming back to. I'm not sure I have the right to it. It's 4 lines a waitress writes on a napkin and pushes across a booth. 4 lines. The part that gets me is the middle. You don't have to be enough. You just have to still be here when she gets there. I'll be honest, I'm at the age where I've started being the one who leaves. The clock says I can go. So I go. I wrote this for whoever's sitting in a waiting room right now, on the worst chair, watching a door. I don't know your name. The line is for you anyway. I'll be back next week with another story about someone we keep walking past. So here's what I actually want to know. The last time the clock said you could go home, did you stay?